Thank you for joining everyone. This is Omar from the Cisco Canada marketing team. Cisco Designed is happy to be partnering with Women of Influence and the BDC to bring you this webinar as part of the What Now initiative to support entrepreneurs and small businesses all across Canada. As part of this initiative, we're offering a resource hub and free licenses of the live recovery program Inward Strong online platform to help you manage some of the stress and possible anxiety going on for you right now, which we'll share more about in this presentation. You'll be able to find the links to these resources in the chat window on your screen. I'd now like to introduce our featured speaker, Paul Rutkowski. Paul is an internationally awarded therapist, speaker, and founder of the Life Recovery Program. In addition to his extensive work in mental health, he has consulted with countless organizations regarding the importance and implementation of psychological health and safety, resilience and wellness programs, including recruitment by the Government of Canada to initiate programs and supervise mental health specialists in some of the most northern and remote regions of the world. His award-winning online life recovery program has helped organizations and thousands of individuals and families successfully manage and monitor mental and behavioral health and other stress-related issues. The program helps people and organizations by taking the next step, getting support, getting better, getting more focused, and becoming inward strong. To quote, "It's like having your own personal wellness coach 24/7. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you join us. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Omar. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here with you folks. And what can I say? Life is stress. Any questions? Okay. Well, we'll unpack some more material before we get to a QA. So really excited to be here and partner with the folks from Cisco, Women of Influence, and BDC. Really just excited to have you on board as well, taking time from your busy schedule to be on this webinar. And I want to just invite you, warmly welcome you to my home office here. It's my setup. I've got my favorite checkered shirt on, my fuzzy slippers, not that you could probably tell, and good to go here. Now, I'm just going to be mindful of the physical distancing. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to be socially responsible. And yeah, life is quite stressful, especially during these times. And for many of us, it feels like our world just got turned upside down. And that's very unsettling, and people can be quite beat up by that experience. And then we may get used to sort of the new normal, and a shift happens, and then another shift happens. And I think I'm saying shift. Yeah, I think I am. And this can make people feel pretty beat up and quite stressed, and can be quite overwhelming. And we're going to unpack some of that and some tools to support you with that. I used to work in the Northwest Territories, and in the summer especially, we were in the boreal forest area, and there was lots of forest fires. And we were told to hunker down in our home, just given the smoke and the air pollution, and basically needed to ride out the storm, if you will. And there's certainly some big differences with this pandemic, but certainly, I've kind of experienced some similarities with it as well. So, you might be familiar with this image. This is Flight 1549, the Miracle on the Hudson. It departed from LaGuardia Airport, January of 2009. And what happened on that day, bird strike, one engine was down, another bird struck the other engine. There's no power to the engines, and they're not actually high off the ground. They didn't, really leave, make it very far from the airport. Now, you can just imagine being on this plane at this time, especially the pilots who have quite a bit of responsibility on their hands, a very challenging thing. And of course, they couldn't predict this would happen. They couldn't control what was, about to, occur with the bird strike. And they had low energy. They had no power. They had low energy. And they had to be quite resourceful here. They needed to think quite quickly. And what they did was something fairly unorthodox. They safely landed the plane on the Hudson River, and all lives were spared. And to me, this is not only a powerful story, this is a powerful metaphor. Low predictability, low control, low energy, and yet, just with some, just some resources there, how to effectively manage that energy to get safely back on the ground and talk about it the next day. We're inundated in the news, with the news and the media, with just really grim news reports and statistics. I was recently speaking to a reporter, doing an interview basically about resilience tools and what have you. And at one point he says, you know what? I am sick to death of this COVID virus. I said, you're not being literal, are you? And he said, gosh, yeah, no, it sounds terrible. I know I'm not literally speaking, of course. But the reporter himself was also just tired of just the same old kind of news, but hence it's the news. I'm going to start with something more hopeful. And here is Ruben. He's highly vulnerable in terms of his age group, highly vulnerable place to be, and that would be in a senior's home. And he contracted COVID in April. And a lot of folks thought, that's it. He's 99 years old. He's not going to make it. Ruben pulled through and is doing just fine. Here's another example. Here's Ada. She's a 103-year-old woman who actually was born around the time of the Spanish flu in early in the 1900s. And a lot of folks thought the same thing. Well, that's it. Game over. Sorry, Ada. She pulled through as well, just fine. Most people recover and pull through. Just kind of, it's nice to have that reminder and that hope. And she basically says, give yourself courage, have faith. And for me, I've made a bit of a mental shift. There's certainly a lot of my own fear, given what's going on with this whole COVID thing. Kind of shifted to sort of an angle of respect. I respect what this virus can do and its impacts, and it's kind of helped mitigate some of my fears by a little shift there. So a little bit about me. I love doing presentations. Usually I would be meeting you face-to-face in a live webinar, a live session versus a webinar. So I'm getting used to this a little bit. I'm also work front line with a lot of folks and to help folks out. Here's a picture of me in Iceland, or Gslöflaflefegen Falls. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Actually, I said it that way just to see if you're paying attention. Okay, good. And as I mentioned, working in northern parts of Canada, we got tired of seeing the demand for services here, supply down here, and that gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So we took a work frontline and put it online. With the program we'll be sharing more, it's made available for you, your home family, your work family, called Inward Strong, and we'll unpack that in just a little bit. And we've been fortunate to have been published a number of times and certainly awarded many times. And really, the awards are for three reasons. One, how innovative the program is. Two, how comprehensive it is. And three, most importantly, its social impact, as it's been saving jobs, families, and lives 24/7. And I just wanted to share a short video from our co-founder. She, obviously with the physical distancing, couldn't be here right now, but I'm just going to share a video and hopefully this plays okay, and play video here.
Hi there, I'm Monique, and I am the co-founder of the Life Planning Program Inward Strong. And we've partnered with Cisco, Women of Influence, and BBC, and others are coming on board, recognizing that as women and business owners, it is really tricky right now because of the pandemic. Something that I know as a female founder is that I have a lot of different challenges that I face. There's a lot of things that I'm juggling, from family to my business to just all kinds of things. And sometimes even in business, without the pandemic, it's tricky. So today, Paul's going to be sharing some incredible tools and resources for you to take in and to apply. And we also encourage you to join at the end where Paul shares about our online self-directed program. We invite you to sign on and access the program. It's free for the next few months. And we want to offer this because we recognize that it is a struggle for all of us. So this is for all of you small business owners. And I do a shout out for women as a female woman who co-owns the business as well. I wish you all the best of health, and we're in this together. So thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Monique. It's a pleasure working with her. So this is what we'll be unpacking today. Is stress, burnout, or what else might be going on, and just recognizing, just kind of normalizing. Actually, my high level what I want to do is, just given all the stress going on, is just provide a greater understanding of what might be going on for you, and whether for your home family or your work family, and certainly provide you with some high-level tools as well. You're going to have far more brain systems, circuits, and cells dedicated to this material, but just invite you just to pause. You took some time out of your busy schedule to watch this webinar right now. How might this information benefit you personally, professionally, or both? Just pause for a sense of purpose. How might this benefit you? And just take maybe 15 seconds to do so. Okay, great. Hopefully you've got a sense of purpose. You're going to have more brain systems, circuits, and cells, and certainly more attention to this material. If you do have a device or pen and paper, I'm just going to want you just to write down those main points, just so it keeps you in focus here for this webinar. And alternatively, if you're near a loved one right now, just go, hey, what do you want to get from this presentation? Well, this is what I want to get. So just take maybe just 15 seconds to do that. Just jot that down and have your purpose firmly established there. Great. I can hear the typing and the gears going there, and I'm feeling the love from just what's going on in some of the interactions there as well. We will have a couple points where we'll do a QA, so do put your questions out, and we'll get to those as best as possible, and throughout the presentation. So as we go through this presentation, you might just think of how you might support someone, perhaps even just personally in your home life, or maybe someone from your work family. So just thought of sort of providing a case scenario might just help with focusing that. So let's say you have an employee. Her name's Mary Ann. You've worked with her for some years. You know her to be warm and gregarious, a hardworking employee. And last year you might have heard that her father passed away. And more recently, and probably maybe even pre-pandemic, you just noticed she was maybe a bit more withdrawn. Perhaps even if it were doing a meeting in a webinar type meeting, she's just not always physically there. She may not be attending, or she might even look disheveled sometimes as well. So this might just put things in focus as we sort of unpack some of the material here today. So like a lot of you folks, certainly some small businesses that are being supported here with these webinars. I'm the Chief of Everything Officer in the small business that we run. And certainly prior to this whole COVID pandemic, there was a lot to juggle and what have you. And just transparency, we actually had lost my dad last year. We just celebrated or honored his birthday just last week, just a couple of days before then. My father-in-law took quite gravely ill, non-COVID related, but it's certainly dicey. So there's lots to juggle. We've all got some stuff going on. There's lots to juggle, especially as this small business owner. And it's really about looking after yourself as best you can. Resilience is persisting in the face of adversity. And it's harder to persist when our energy is low. And when our energy is, low or zero, that's essentially death. And I want you and your venture to last a good long time. So it's really about, much like the Miracle on Hudson flight, it's managing the energy and as best we can, so we don't crash and burn. So this is from the Mayo Clinic. This is a burnout quiz. There's going to be 10 items. I'm going to put them up on the screen, and we could call this it would be really, really good to have a vacation like right now. We'll call it that quiz. How about that? And so for every yes, basically that's 1 point. So just to calculate your total for this page, these 5 questions, starting with, have you become cynical or critical at work? If it's a yes, that's 1 point, and just keep going through the 5 questions. Okay, we're ready. Questions, the remaining questions. Okay, so do you have a total? And I just want to qualify, everything we're talking about today, this pandemic is gas in the fire. I'm also kind of interested to know what your total was pre-pandemic, because my guess is whatever, is given the pandemic, it's going to put just gas in the fire for these issues. perhaps where are you at now, and where were you maybe late February, early March, pre-pandemic? I just wonder what your score would have been then. My guess is maybe a little bit lower. The interesting thing is, if you've answered, even one yes to this quiz, there might be some burnout going on. There might be some burnout going on. There might be other things going on as well. It might just explore, merit some investigation. Could be a thyroid issue in terms of low energy. It could be perhaps a common cold of mental health and mental health concerns. And we'll unpack some of that in this presentation. So again, I just want to kind of address, not so much what's wrong with me, because other people are feeling just, what's wrong with me? I'm forgetful, I'm losing information, I'm tired. Well, maybe it's what's happened to me, what's happening to all of us, in terms of this very unprecedented time. I know I'm kind of, lost an appointment or two, and maybe have just kind of checked out a little bit. And I'd say that's probably quite a normal thing given what's happened. And if we could just frame it from what's happened to me versus what's wrong, it takes away some of that self-critical kind of viewpoint, which can actually help it relieve some of the stress. These are unprecedented times, so not surprising you're experiencing an unprecedented level of stress. I want to emphasize your health is number one. Hello, especially during a pandemic. I think it was Steve Colbert who said this. The last few weeks have been the longest 10 years of my life. Show of hands if you can relate to that. Okay, I can't see the hand, but I could sense it. So I just want to emphasize everyone has a breaking point, and everyone responds to stress differently. So we're talking about stress. What do I mean by that? And basically the way I see it, this is a bit of a recap actually of the previous webinar. This is a series of webinars hosted by the folks at Cisco, Women of Influence and BDC. And so I spent more time on the previous webinar regarding, so I'm just going to kind of give a high-level review, but I would encourage you to go to that previous presentation to get a more detailed view. Essentially, the way I see it, this is like watching a train wreck happening in slow motion. We're not sure when it's going to end. We're not sure, what kind of damage it's going to do. We just know it doesn't look good, and it's lasting a while, and it's probably going to be a bumpy ride. Basically, as human beings, low control and low predictability is very stressful for us. We like predictability, we like control. The opposite of that can feel quite chaotic and can be anxiety provoking. So I just want to normalize that. Again, to help normalize, about 2,000 Canadians were basically polled. This is mid-April. This is when things just started to hit the fan, if you will. And half of those folks are basically feeling pretty upset and, worried and concerned. And there's a subset of that group that, quite intensely so. Interestingly enough, 34%, about a third of us, were actually grateful, encountering our blessings during these challenging times. And we'll talk about the power of gratitude in just a little bit. And 30% are bored. And just wondering for you, this reflective question, which one are you, which one of these are going on for you? More worried, or maybe grateful, bored, or perhaps somewhere in between? Again, just recapping some of the last presentation, because I think this is very vital to know. Our intelligence, our IQ, takes a hit during stress. They took a group of small business folks, and farmers in this case, pre-harvest. Before the harvest would become ripe, and versus post-harvest, when they got their, the cash for their goods, farmers pre-harvest time were stressed, and that had an impact on their intelligence by 13 IQ points. And stress and a sense of scarcity will impede cognitive functioning. And scarcity can actually be any deficit: money, time, social ties. In fact, we've been experiencing these weird deficits over the last couple of months. Maybe there's a deficit of a resource that's occupied your mind. Perhaps it was toilet paper. What's up with the no toilet paper? Will I get some? Blah, blah, blah. Will there be enough? And all these things, the stress, the scarcity, can really consume our mental bandwidth. So I just wanted to just invite you to be gentle with yourself, and your work family, your home family. We're all feeling a bit off kilter, and it's taking up bandwidth. Boredom can be stressful. Recall the Canadians, about a third, are quite bored. Interesting study here. And participants in a study were given a mild electric shock. Everyone said, you know what, I don't want to do that again. I'd rather pay money than get shocked again. Or would we, or they in this case? However, when left alone in a stimulus-neutral room, a boring room, no device, no nothing, people prefer to shock themselves. Almost 2/3 of men and a quarter of the women chose to shock themselves versus being bored. Boredom can be unpleasant. Boredom has its own stressor. You might be familiar with this. I love this model. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And as a first world nation, we're typically in the upper part of this pyramid. And these are more the higher psychological needs. Guess what, folks? We've all been taking a hit. We've all been knocked down a notch or two. So more the physical needs. The physiological needs might be, where's the toilet paper? Safety needs, perhaps emotional safety. And again, this could take up a lot of bandwidth, and a lot of us are in a survival mode, psychologically speaking. In a survival mode, gosh, how bad is this going to be? I want to ride up the storm, less predictability, low control. And not too surprising, usually when these needs are probably, we're out of survival mode and higher needs kick in, they might kick in big time. They might kick in with a fair bit of intensity and grief. Speaking of grief, a lot of us will be experiencing some levels of grief. Some of us might be numb or in a state of shock or denial. No, it's not a big deal. There's no virus. Anger, well, dang you, virus. I'll just leave it at that. Bargaining, well, no problem. This whole thing will blow over in 2 weeks. Wait a minute, that was 6 weeks ago. Maybe the bargaining isn't working. Sadness and depression. The world is hurting. And so a lot of you folks, and just folks in general that you know, might be experiencing some of these symptoms. Of course, acceptance is kind of the end state of that. Again, actually, I want to say these aren't stages or end states. This process is exhausting, grief, because it ain't a linear process. It doesn't go from A to B to C. It goes from maybe some denial to depression to some bargaining, back to denial. That could be crazy making. Again, there's a sense of unpredictability with that. But I just want to highlight what this process is to help you provide you with a high level of, oh, okay, maybe that makes sense of what's going on. Reflective question. I'm just wondering where you might fit in this model. So another way to put it, we're all experiencing a sense of just limbo and loss. We're in this limbo going, what happens next? Hunker down, stay in our home. Sense of loss, maybe loss of job opportunities, loss of just going to the grocery store whenever you want without feeling always guarded and vigilant about not getting close to someone. And so this kind of this weird loss and limbo going on. And we're going from what's known and familiar, our lives pre-pandemic, to this very unknown, unfamiliar, what's going on here. The nice, reassuring thing is things do go back to known and familiar. Said another way, things aren't as predictable and controllable as they were. Things become more predictable and controllable. As you can imagine, this creates a sense of imbalance while we're in the midst of this, in the middle in the process. But much like you've probably weathered other storms in your life and unknowns, you get back to more predictable, more normal. My suggestion would be to keep your routines as much as possible. I like to work out on a regular basis, and I do my resistance training on certain days. I make sure I maintain that schedule, just so my brain, my body has a sense of predictability with that, given all the other unpredictable stuff going on. My encouragement would also be gentle with yourself and others, because all these things knock down on that hierarchy of needs, grief, just stress going on. We're all going to feel a little bit mentally taxed, tired, and not our usual self. So, stress. Too little stress can be boring. We talked about boredom there just a little bit before, and we like some stimulation. Otherwise, we're not performing very well. There's the ideal amount of stress that puts us kind of in the zone. That's when we perform at our best. Too much stress, we're out of the zone, we're not stimulated enough, we are overstimulated, and we feel like we're jumping out of our skin. And again, our performance takes a hit. The interesting thing is, these can cycle. I'm too much on this side of the too stressed part of the curve where I'm exhausted and I loop back to the I have no stimulation anymore. And actually, one kind of notion of depression in terms of a symptom is exhaustion from anxiety. And last bit of the recap here, I do think this is vital information that you know. Again, just to put things in context, you might be familiar with the Holmes-Rahe Social Readjustment Scale. And basically, you might have seen this before. I encourage you actually to just look up the PDF for this or tally this for yourself. They would just seeing what kind of stresses were going on for folks. Death of a spouse, 100 points, for example. Dismissal from work may have gone on for some of you folks at 47 points. And there's a whole bunch of them there, and some of them have more intensity of points. There's some positive things here as well. If you notice, marriage at number 7 is 50 points or life change units. Having an outstanding personal achievement, number 25, is 28 points. What's that about? Again, it takes us from a sense of predictability and known to an unknown. And when we have those unknowns and that transition, again, is stressful. I wouldn't be surprised if most of us have a point, 200 points or more with this scale. And it's not the higher the points, the higher the freak out. The higher the points really means the more need to just for self-care. And in terms of self-care, in terms of self-compassion versus being critical, it's more what's happened to me versus what's wrong with me or what's wrong with my teammate or what have you. We're all going through a lot of stuff. And there's a sense of common humanity to that. There are billions of people on this planet who are hurting right now, who are overwhelmed, and it kind of just creates a sense of we're in this together because we're kind of in a similar place here. And again, I just like to highlight the previous presentation. We go into more detail with that information. So here's a helpful tip. And encourage you to maybe go back when this is archived so you can review it in your own time. But these are some things that will just help you maintain your energy, your sense of resilience, especially given the bandwidth that's taking a hit. Do one thing at a time. And maybe that's the most important thing you need to do at that point or in that day. Give yourself extra time because it's probably going to require more bandwidth, maybe more distractions with a child kind of barging into your meeting or home office or what have you. And what I like to just highlight here on the bottom is, when is your peak time? When's your peak time when you're most focused and productive? For me, it's mid-morning at around 10 till about 11:30. I am focused, I'm at my peak. And when is your peak time? Knowing that is useful because that's when you have the most energy. And in those moments, it's probably best to address the things that are maybe more complex and require your full focus. So another helpful tip and kind of reflective question, where are you currently successfully managing your time and energy? This is a what's working, and maybe sort of let's take a look at what's not working. How are you managing your time and energy in that successful arena? How might you be doing that? Next question, going through these quickly, high level, I realize, where do you struggle? And what changes are you willing to increase or to make in terms of increasing your time, your energy, and your attention? What resources you might have available to help you do that? Maybe you can delegate something over to a colleague, a family member. And when would be a good time to get this started? What's currently working? How are you doing that? What's not working, and what can you do about that? It's just another way of asking this. It's very important. A question for you. Just curious, when your bank account is low, do you tend to feel less stress or more stress? My guess is when our bank account is low or financial accounts are low, we tend to get into higher stress. We're afraid we might bust the bank, if you will. How about your life accounts? This is what I love working in the territories and in just indigenous cultures. They have the medicine wheel, the mental, physical, spiritual, etc. This is kind of a way of conceptualizing here. Reflective question for you. Which of these life accounts, which one or ones are you kind of doing well with and keeping fairly balanced? Perhaps it's physical, for example. Perhaps you're maintaining routine, you're doing some kind of outdoor, walk or what have you, and that's going quite well. Just curious, so how are you doing it? What's helping you do that? Let's look at some of these other categories. Where is an area, which life account, maybe you're feeling a little bit of a deficit in? You're afraid you might bust the bank here. Maybe it's a social thing. Gosh, I just haven't connected, face-to-face, person-to-person with my, my family or friends. what can you do about that if that's the case? Maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you doing in that sort of deficit sort of account? If it's social, for example, maybe, well, I'm at about 3 out of 10. 3, 1 is doing not well at all. 10 is doing the best, so maybe I'm at a 3. Well, what's making it a 3 versus a lower number, if that's the case? Well, okay, at least I'm connecting via, using technology, and you know what? Yeah, that is working. Yeah. What's something that might raise that a point or even half a point higher? Well, maybe it might just be, I got to step that up a little bit. I'm going to schedule more times when I'm able to connect with people. Maybe, at certain times of the day when I tend to feel most lonely or bored and stressed perhaps. So you can go back to this, and which ones are you good at? What might even bring those good ones up a notch or two? Which ones are you having a challenge with? What's some things that you're doing to keep it maybe at that score versus lower? What's maybe some things you could do to bring it up as well? And we'll unpack some other tips as we go along here. I'm going to segue to, is this a stress thing or maybe something else is going on? We're going to talk about some of the common colds of mental health and anxiety and depression, etc. And we're just going to do a bit of a quiz. So, quiz, yay. Okay, you ready? Question, what is the leading cause of death? Now, context, this is all pre-pandemic. This is all pre-COVID and lockdown and what have you. So at this point, COVID has put gas in the fire, so I just want to create that context for you. What is the leading cause of death for North Americans? A, B, C, or D? How many folks are tempted to say B? Yeah, okay. It is actually opioids. Drug abuse and overdoses is the leading cause of death. It has been for some years for North Americans under the age of 50. Can you guess how long it takes for the average person with one or more of these issues, before they access service, if they get help at all? How long does it take for someone to get service, historically speaking? A, B, C, or D? Did I hear it? Oh, is that your final answer? Okay. Actually, it's D. This is called delayed treatment onset, 6 to 23 years. And you can imagine what's going on for folks while they wait, physically, emotionally, and what have you. Mental health and addiction will shorten one's lifespan by A, B, C, or D. And the answer is by decades. By decades, this is a huge review of over 1 million people, 407 studies basically, in various sort of, ways of dying essentially. And these issues kick the crap out of people. What is the greatest barrier to accessing treatment for these issues? These are all barriers. What's the biggest one, do you think? A, B, C, or D? Access is still an issue for lots of folks. Stigma is the biggest issue, hence often the 6 to 23-year wait. And just a few more. Early intervention and or medical treatment for these issues will do what? A, B, C, or D? D, it may decrease long-term disability. It may prevent development of other illnesses. And we'll talk about the whole mind-body connection in a little bit. Excuse me. What is the net annual loss of profit for Canadian companies due to these issues? What do you think? A, B, C, or D? The D's have it. 14% of net annual profits were lost pre-COVID. Expect these numbers to be higher given what's going on due to these issues. How many Canadians successfully suicide a year? A, B, C, or D? The answer is D. And that's nearly 4,000 suicides a year, roughly 11 suicides a day. If you're kind of in the Eastern Standard Time right now, let's put this in perspective. When you had lunch, and by the time you're hearing my voice right now, odds are that's a Canadian who's killed himself. You hearing my voice right now. And the next time you probably take a washroom break, maybe a tea or coffee break, odds are that's another Canadian who's killed himself. Can you guess when the riskiest time is for someone with a depression for them to suicide? Before, during, or after a depression? Now, you might think during a depression, and that makes sense. Someone might be thinking it, they might be feeling it. However, often people don't have the energy to do something as dramatic as suicide in the midst of a depression. Here's the raw deal. It is basically after depression or before the onset of another one, highest risk. And we can only imagine, this is how awful depression is. I never want to go back to that dark place again. Now that I'm feeling better, I'll take my life. And this might be crazy making you feel loved one. Oh gosh, they seem to be doing better. They seem more themselves. That's when folks are at highest risk. In terms of seasonality, spring for North Americans. Spring is also the highest sort of risk in terms of season. Most people think, well, winter and what have you. Same deal. People are kind of coming out of their winter thaw. The weather's nice, becoming more social. And this is where people are highest risk. Just a couple of springs ago, a couple of years ago, I have a close family friend called Tristan. And he'd been struggling with some of these common colds of mental health. He'd been struggling with substance use. And a few years ago, he did take his life. And when they commit suicide, it's thorough, and often what I mean thorough as in gruesome. And it was very unfortunate. It was his 11-year-old nephew who found Tristan. And these are very tragic things to happen indeed. What percentage of employees actually access an EAP, an employee assistance provider, for counseling? This is called the utilization rate. Do you think it's A, B, C, or D? How many people access an employee assistance provider? And the answer is about 5%. And again, stigma being a big issue, people are afraid to sometimes get support and maybe afraid their boss might find out or what have you. How effective do you think online solutions are in treating these issues? A, B, C, or D? And the answer is D. Been many studies over the decade plus, and self-directed programs are equal and comparable to face-to-face support, yet you can guess which one is far more accessible and scalable. Last one. What can you do to look after your mental health? A, B, C, or D? And the answer is knowing the signs and symptoms and taking appropriate action. This is pre-COVID. This is also pre-COVID as well. This was a study done by BDC and the CMHA, and these are for entrepreneurs. These are for small businesses and the folks who run them. And almost 2/3 of business owners felt depressed at least once a week. This was published late 2019, by the way. Half say that their mental health issues interfere with their ability to work. Being the CEO, Chief of Everything Officer, I could probably relate. I'm sure a lot of you can as well. Female entrepreneurs were especially hard hit in terms of just stress, depression, what have you. Often, more roles to sort of play at home and at work and what have you. So this is the assumption when it comes to these common colds of mental health. This is the reality. Half of us will have 2 or more of these issues by the time we hit 40. And in fact, the research is showing now with COVID, half of us are having some concerns on the dimension of mental health right now. And there's a dimension here. There's mental illness. I have no mental health at all. In fact, I'm very in the negative here and have a mental illness, and it's quite debilitating, to kind of neutral to mental health, where I'm functioning quite positively and what have you. So I invite you just to do a bit of a simulation. This is kind of walking in another person's shoes here. Now, unless you've got a lot going on, then forego this simulation and just think happy thoughts. But if you're willing, not too much is going on for you, I'm just going to invite you just to begin this simulation. And what I'm just going to invite you to do is just imagine the worst time of your life. Very worst time of your life. And a lot's going on for you. During this worst time of your life, how are you feeling or functioning? Your lowest level of functioning is for millions of Canadians, people around the world, their best level of functioning. Your lowest level of functioning, short term, is for millions, their best. And that's kind of what mental health issues feel like, feeling just really beat up all the time. During this worst time of your life, did you share how you're doing with everyone? You prefer to kind of keep it on the down low. If you said keep it on the down low, isn't that what stigma's about? Feeling really beat up? Well, you don't want people to know. During this worst time of your life, you don't want folks to know. What did you do to take the edge off? what would you be willing to do to take the pain away short-term despite long-term consequences? Well, isn't that what an addictive pattern of behavior is about? Feeling beat up, I don't want anyone to know, and, I just got to numb myself from this pain, I'm going to just engage in a behavior that's not necessarily healthy long-term. So you can imagine, you pretty much all have a recovery story, recovering from an accident, an illness, a loss of self or others. There's no need for stigma. Mental health is about brain health, and these are some of the latest in neuroimaging. This isn't a photograph of the brain, but what you're seeing here is what's called the regional cerebral blood flow, a metabolically healthy brain. If you notice the smooth surface, it means a good amount of connectivity. The light yellowish color means good activity as well. That's our reference point. So next image, you ready? 3, 2, 1. Ooh, okay. Here I have a 38-year-old, 17-year heavy weekend drinking. Wow, what's the big deal, Paul? I don't drink on the weekend. Just, if you think you're seeing some damage here, just give me a mm-hmm. If you're thinking you're seeing a lot of damage here, just go mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, all substances are neurotoxic. They retract the dendrites that communicate between the cells. They shrink up the cells themselves pretty bad. How well do you think this person is handling stress or making decisions or coping with life? Perhaps not as well. Here's somebody with a majorly stressed out brain. Here's someone with a major depression or 2 or more years. And in typical anxiety and depression, there's the elevated level of the stress hormone cortisol. What does cortisol do in prolonged amounts? It is also neurotoxic. There goes those dendrites, there goes those cells getting pretty beat up. You can imagine an impaired brain is an impaired person, which has effects elsewhere as well. This is a busy slide. Just thought I'd leave it for you as a reference. We're going to unpack some of these as well. But you can see on the left the impacts that these issues have on individual. Well, certainly health and infections being another one, or one of those. In the middle, there's some things you could do if you're an employer. On the right there, there's some healthy habits that you can engage in as well. And we'll unpack some of these. Just another slide of stats. Again, half of us will have 2 more of these issues by the time we hit 40. With COVID, that's kind of changed the situation to a lot of us are hit right now. And these are obviously costly to brain cells, human costs, social costs, what have you. And of course, these are a leadership issue and need to be addressed accordingly. So here's some signs and symptoms of some of these common colds. And we'll start with anxiety. And actually, 1/3 of us pre-COVID would experience clinical anxiety at least once in our life, 1/3 of us. This is the common cold of mental health. And if you have a handful of these symptoms going on for a month or more, pre-COVID, of course, this is changing everything with the whole COVID thing. We're probably having symptoms of this. They're maybe not clinically diagnosable per se. And basically with anxiety, there's just an edge, feel like I'm jumping out of my skin, and often we're avoiding whatever might be unpleasant that might be provoking the anxiety. One way to basically define anxiety is a fear of loss, an anticipation of loss, and feeling anxious as a result. There's another big common cold, depression. And if you have a handful of these symptoms for a couple of weeks or more, that's often the indication that there might be some depression going on. And the main culprits are low mood, low energy. Low energy, hard to even get out of bed, low mood. And often with depression, there might be something called learned helplessness. And learned helplessness feels like, darned if I do, and darned if I don't. Nothing seems to change and just quite stuck. Loss. We talked about limbo and loss. Depression could be considered a response to loss. Anxiety is anticipation of loss, fear of loss. Depression is response to loss. So not surprising. Given the limbo, the losses, the uncertainty and stress, not too surprising where you or the folks you care about might have some of these symptoms going on. Signs of substance abuse are basically, depending on a person's baseline, but changes in behavior, changes in maybe physical state, and what have you. And there's been more drinking going on. There's been a 40% increase in the purchase of alcohol with COVID. And I see a lot of clients who they're engaging, kind of getting into the risky zone here of more than 2 drinks a day, or more than 10 a week for women. Beyond that is considered risk drinking. For men, more than 3 drinks a day, more than 15 a week. Beyond that, standard drinks or below is considered risky drinking. Recall the brain scans. Your liver, your kidneys can all get pretty beat up. And this is a recent study just done just the other month. And most of us have increased our consumption of alcohol. And the main reasons for that, again, unpredictability, uncertainty, schedule change, boredom, half of us, and stress. So here's some things to look out for. So look out for, again, pre-COVID, these would be sort of the typical responses. I'll give some things, some helpful suggestions kind of that would help more currently, and that's upcoming. But typically look out for, maybe just attendance issues, people checked out, maybe just getting complaints from others regarding, a staff member, change in appearance, missed deadlines, and what have you. I do want to touch on this, suicide. This is one of the last taboos. I think it's very important that we talk about this. If you do suspect someone is suicidal, do ask. Sue, it sounds like a lot is going on for you right now. How are you doing? Sometimes I just I wish I just wasn't around it. Well, gosh, Sue, what do you mean by that? Sometimes I just want it to be over. Pandemic or I want just this to be over. I don't want to be around it. If you suspect someone's suicidal, be direct and go, gosh, I'm really concerned about you, Sue. Are you considering maybe hurting yourself in some way? That's going to be obviously awkward for you to put that out there. It might be a little bit awkward, but often a relief for the other person. And it might just be, how can we get some help around that, Sue? Because I care and I am concerned. And this could save a life. So some things to look out for. This is an acronym. You can find it in our Inward Strong program and some of the resources, as well as just Google online, is Pathworm. It's just a series of symptoms here. For example, S, substance abuse, H, hopelessness. This isn't bulletproof, but typically the more symptoms someone might have tends to be a higher risk of potential suicide. But I'd share this for the men out there, or for those of you who know men. Men, unfortunately, are not talking about these issues, kind of stuffing it down, and unfortunately, taking their lives as a result. So these are some recommendations from the CDC, and certainly as workplace, and I realize the boundaries are quite blurred now between work and home and what have you, in terms of just scheduling meetings, and I know we're physically distancing. But typically you want to, just make people aware of resources, that you're obviously concerned for their well-being and their mental health. I'm certainly concerned if there's any mental health concerns, kind of on this end, mental illness, and here's a crisis line if needs be as well. And the reason I bring that up, because deaths of despair, somewhat of a morose but poetic kind of phrase for it. People are engaging in higher riskier behaviors, more opioid use, drugs, and unfortunately suicide as well. And that's probably going to be ongoing for a while. Talked about that Maslowian hierarchy. We've been in survival mode. Once our emotional needs kind of kick in again, it's probably going to kick in again big time. So, just a little bit more material, then we can kind of get to a bit of a QA and provide some more material on burnout in just a little bit. But mental health concerns have a way of becoming medical concerns. Doesn't matter whether the threat's out there or if it's perceived in here. If this is detecting threat, there goes the threat response. Thoughts, emotions, memories can all turn on that response. Stress in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's a mobilization response. Short term, it's beneficial. But if we're chronically activating the stress response, not good. The question I ask folks is, how long can you run a car at 10,000 RPM before things start to break down? And this is what does break down. With mental health concerns, studying the overlap between some of the mental health concern, not having these concerns previously, but developing these later on. Lots of research being done in depression and osteoporosis. And I have folks that come and say, Paul, depression hurts. I feel it in my bones. Interestingly enough, bones don't regenerate quite so well with a major depression, cortisol being the culprit. And of course, here's some other concerns as well. Now, just to highlight kind of how the physiology works here, just going to give some scenarios here. And so kind of question for you. Can you guess what a zebra does when it sees a lion? What does a zebra do when it sees a lion? Any guesses? Runs. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Can you guess what a gazelle does when it sees its natural predator, a cheetah? What does a gazelle do when it sees a cheetah? What do you think? Runs. Good guess. Actually, it'll hunch down. It'll hunch down, get close to the ground, and remain as still as possible. And what is that gazelle hoping will happen? That the cheetah goes by, it's undetected, and can get on with its day. What's going on for that gazelle in that moment? Massive amounts of energy. What's that gazelle ready to do in a split second? Run like heck. So let's say cheetah's gone, gazelle is safe. What do you think the gazelle does then? Runs like heck. Why? It knows massive amounts of energy. If it does not discharge this energy, it will become sick. This is a rather crude question, crude analogy. Forgive me, but I'm going to bring it up. Bring it up. It's kind of funny when we get to what I'm talking about here. Some of you might just be having a snack, what have you, but just wondering if you've ever had to puke, vomit, or upchuck. I'm sensing some nods there. Some of you a little more recent than I care to mention. Okay, no judgment. What does the body do when it has toxins inside? It lets them up and out. I had some food poisoning not too long ago, IV bag, 1.5 IV bags in the hospital, not a fun thing. And when we kind of bring stuff up, puking, retching, that's a short-term stress response for sure. Burns, the retching, it might be embarrassing if people are looking. What's the experience usually afterward? Relief, most people say. And the body does it very naturally. How often I see behind closed doors, pain, grief, come up for people, nope, got to keep that down. Yeah, but Paul, there's a lot going on right now. No, I have to keep that under control. This is a recipe for keeping things stuck. This is a recipe for becoming sick. And as you can see here, in terms of even job stress and mental health, these things can beat us up pretty bad. Now, we'll take a break in just a moment here. Is this so hard to believe, mind, and the effects on the body here, and, brain tissue getting impaired, body being impaired? What will water eventually do to a rock? It will eventually erode it. How big is a virus? What can a virus do? A lot. Significant things come in small packages. There is hope. The brain, body, in ideal circumstances, wants to be healthy and heal. If you can see here, here's some neuroimaging on the left of somebody with a mental health concern. Here's somebody on 1 year later on the right. Now, there is some more material. We're going to talk about burnout still, and certainly some things to help mitigate that. But I thought at this point, maybe just pause just for a couple of questions or so. And I'm just going to open up the floor here. I'll just keep that image going. Bear with me, I'm still new to this platform. So talk amongst yourselves here. Okay. Okay, well, it's a bit hard to read. So sleep. There's a question on sleep. Experiencing some just loss of sleep. How might I kind of get a better sleep? And actually, it's a great question. I'm going to spend, you must be anticipating my presentation here. I'm actually going to be talking a little bit about that a little bit later. There are some best practices around that. But for right now, I just want to say, just want to normalize that for sleep for a lot of folks has been compromised in terms of the quantity and quality of one's sleep. So, and I think it's about being gentle with that. Okay. Oh gosh, sorry folks, I'm not sure if I'm operating this very well. Didn't see any other question, at least maybe not on my end. So I'll keep going. Oops. Advancing the slide. Whew. Okay. So as I mentioned, even news reporters themselves are getting tired of just reporting the same old unpleasant news, and a lot of more pleasant news, unfortunately, is being overlooked. So it does make sense to be COVID educated. Don't get inundated by the news. Maybe just check in a good source of news, maybe once, maybe twice a day tops. For sleep, especially, going back to the sleep question, I wouldn't recommend viewing any news, past 7 p.m. or at least several hours before you go to bed. The way I see it, breaking news is usually about things breaking. And speaking to someone recently, they're basically saying, it ain't 24-hour news, it's 24-hour horror that's being reported. So here's some things that you could do to maybe just watch, the noise in your own head. I'm just going to share a story of two scuba divers. Two scuba divers have the same amount of oxygen in each of their tanks. They go on an underwater excursion and become trapped underwater. One panics, consumes all their oxygen, and unfortunately dies. The other conserves their oxygen, conserves their energy, and basically is, has enough oxygen to be rescued and lives. Rhetorical question for you. Which diver would you prefer to be? Was there ever a time in your life when your perspective, despite stress, your perspective might have helped mitigate that stress? My guess is you would not be here today. At some point in your life, many times in your life, there might have been some stressor. Because you had a certain perspective on things, it helps manage that stressor better. Was there ever a time in your life when there might have been a stressor going on for you and your perspective just really kind of amplified it and made that stress just somewhat unbearable? And maybe looking back, you go, gosh, why did I get so stressed out about that thing? Looking back now, it wasn't such a big deal. My guess is I've been guilty of that. We've all done that as well. So how did you do the first one? How did you have a perspective that helped mitigate the stress? Was it maybe a coping mechanism, maybe having a mantra for yourself? I've gone through worse times, I can get through this. Just be curious to know what that perspective is. If it's worked in the past, it could work in the present and future. This is from the School of Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. This is also will be provided in your Inward Strong program. And so CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and this is what's called cognitive distortions, and more or less the dirty dozen of them. This is the sort of, we've all got these as human beings, this noise in our head. So one could be overgeneralizing things, thinking things are bad all the time. Another big one for folks is shoulds. This could look like this. I should be more on top of work here. This pandemic should be over. I shouldn't be so stressed about things. I shouldn't have so many shoulds. Well, you know what? I often say to folks, it sounds like you're shoulding all over yourself. Yeah, I know what that sounds like. It sounds like you're shoulding all over yourself. So it's sometimes just sort of checking what's going on in our head. If you look up CBT, Cognitive Distortions, or in the Inward Strong program and some of the resources there, and you spend a whole module basically talking about some of these common colds and what you can do about them, you'll find some activities that can help address these. So we're going to address burnout. And burnout, as of May of last year, 2019, the World Health Organization has seen this as an increasing issue. And of course, with COVID, this is the pre-COVID world. Now, of course, I would expect these to be increasing as well. And of course, these are concerning stats and implications regarding burnout. So what is burnout? And basically, it's more due to workplace stress. The workplace being the major stressor in this case, and there's three basically dimensions here. Feeling exhausted, feeling cynical, and maybe just more distant from your job, and just feeling ineffective and reduced efficacy. And again, this is more specific usually to the workplace. So this is an easy way to remember burnout. Are you feeling the ice? Are you feeling ineffective? Are you feeling cynical about your work? And the real telltale one is, are you just feeling exhausted regarding your work? Now, this isn't an actual medical condition or clinical condition, but it's known as what's called an occupational syndrome. Syndrome basically means cluster of symptoms and due to workplace stress. The interesting thing is here, with folks who do have a lot of burnout, recall those brain scans, those weren't burnout brain scans per se, but neuroimaging studies found that folks who experience quite a bit of burnout later in life, often their brains look like someone who has had a lot of trauma, that happened earlier in life. Two different groups we're comparing here. So, and often again, it brings a state of overwhelm. It's not just in our head, we're feeling it all over. And in fact, it can often mimic basically symptoms of depression as well. And really, and most of us are probably experiencing this right now with just a lot of things going on with the whole COVID thing, changing our routine, lots of just hunkering in place and quarantining in place, and perhaps interrupted by family and what have you. And often our demands are greatly exceeding our resources, and that can lead to burnout. We talked about the scale, the stress performance scale, and burnout is essentially when we've had too much stress. We're on the far right part of that scale to the point where we kind of loop back to the other end and we're just exhausted by it. And of course, that's a heck of a ride to be on. So here's the main contributors of burnout. Workload. Really high demand, expectations, deadlines, etc. Unrealistically so, perhaps. Low control. We talked about control before, so maybe being or feeling micromanaged. And again, this is not sometimes just objectively, this is subjectively what people are just experiencing or perceiving. Low reward, maybe not being acknowledged. Gosh, I'm busting my butt all the time and I'm not getting a reward. Not having a supportive community and peers. Fairness, well, I'm busting my butt all the time and meanwhile, Joe over there seems to get all the breaks and I just kind of go unnoticed. Values. When a company's values are not aligned with their employee values. And burnout basically happens when one or more of these is going on and is mismatched between the individual and their job. Now, if we were to just stop this presentation right now, looking at this list, this is some valuable criteria. How does your work environment fare on this list? How balanced is that workload? How much control does your team have? Are they being rewarded effectively, even just acknowledged appropriately? And on it goes. This could be a useful reminder of some imbalances maybe going on in your work setting, and maybe it's about how can you bring these into better balance. Here's some general recommendations, and this is during COVID, so this is some tools, some tips you can implement right now. One, facilitate just more regular meetings. You want to be connected to your team, and empathically so, empathically meaning humanly so. That helps create, number two, basically a supportive culture. Provide clear guidelines. One guideline I would actually suggest is, you know what, as the CEO, there's lots going on. I want to balance my work and my family and not burn out or have anyone burn out here. 5:30, 6 the latest, my laptop is closed. I don't do any work-related stuff anymore. And if you're providing tools and technology to support your people so they can work remotely, it's best to just give them some support around that and maybe some training around that. Recognition goes a long way. And just maybe just saying, hey, folks, this is tough times. Really appreciate the fact that you're doing as well as you are. So we kind of touched on burnout kind of high level. I was interviewed regarding this topic last year. If you want a bit more in-depth best practices and what have you, if you look up, search my name, Rutkowski, and dealing with burnout, Rutkowski dealing with burnout, you most likely find this article. You can see the link on the bottom there as well. So I'm going to segue to some helpful hints and tools and tips. First of all, it's not your responsibility to pathologize, diagnose, or what have you, folks that you may be working with or working for you. First of all, that's probably inappropriate, most likely it is, and probably lead to your own burnout. You want to show that you care about them. And as you can imagine, many issues do get worse before they become better. And some folks do need assistance and what have you. And do let them know that you care about them. Do let them know that there are supports and resources for them. So some next steps you could take here to share with your work family, maybe even your home family. You want to normalize the stressors. Actually, number 4, you could share this presentation with them, or certainly the previous one, to go more in depth about just normalizing some of the stresses going on. Check in with your team. And again, as I mentioned, keep personal, professional routines and boundaries as much as possible. You may need to redefine what success looks like for your team and adjust your expectations, and you probably need to discuss that with each employee. So your work is not your worth. You want to focus at this point more on your people as much as you can over productivity. I know it's easier said than done. So scale and close balance, this is the way I see it. It doesn't take much weight on either side to tip it in that direction toward illness, toward health. We're just going to put some bricks here to hopefully tip it more in your favor. So these are some protective factors, things that help reduce stress and hormone cortisol. Socially connecting as much as possible virtually, or obviously is kind of the way to go here. Having a sense of belonging. One way to kind of get more from too much, too little stress, too much stress actually is physical activity. That helps bring us more to the middle. If we're too much on the far end, feeling overwhelmed, exercise can again bring us back to the middle and more balanced. Having outlets. Watching maybe a funny show. But I need to talk a little bit about this, journaling. I call it mental detox. 2 studies I'll share here. One was the University of Cambridge, and they gave folks a little suction wound and 3 groups. Group 1, we'll just see in 2 weeks, do your usual thing. Group 2, we want you just to do some journaling about your day-to-day activities. Group 3, journal about your stuff, your stress. All the groups come back 2 weeks later. Group 1 and 2 heals the same. Guess what happened to the 3rd group who actually journaled about their inner world, their stuff? Their wound healed faster. They produced more human growth hormone. Kind of like puking, they brought up stuff. It was unpleasant, but it was a relief. Their bodies weren't quite as tense, nor were their brains, etc. University of Austin, Texas study, just highlight this, and they had a group of students, basically, participants. They had them do all kinds of testing for their blood pressure, mood, sleep. Sleep here again, maybe another tip here for the sleep question. And anxiety, heart rate, etc. And they actually said to this one group, the experimental group rather, I want you to journal about your traumas for 4 days, 15 minutes a day. Your traumas, big T, maybe little t, whatever that looks like for you. Journal about your traumas for the next 4 days for 15 minutes a day. So this is a 1-hour investment after 4 days. 6 months later, guess what happened? Experimental group that actually journaled about their traumas. Yeah, it was kind of unpleasant. It brought stuff up and out, much like the puking metaphor. Their blood pressure was better, sleep, heart rate, anxiety levels were lower. They were doing way better. I do a lot of journaling, especially during these challenging times. And if I don't journal for a couple of days, I start to notice. I get a little antsy. My wife starts to notice I haven't journaled for more than a few days. My wife will actually sense it, and she'll tell me, hey, Paul, have you been journaling lately? Mind, body, it's connected. It's a detox. Find comfort. We talked about the spiritual, biopsychosocial spiritual, the 4 quadrants, life accounts, and it could just be finding things that are meaningful to you if it's not part of an organized faith per se. It could be connecting with nature as much as possible. I want you to say this out loud. Sleep is vitally important to my health. So say it out loud. Okay, awesome. It sure is. And here's some best practices you can do in terms of healthy sleep hygiene. And you'll have this kind of for reference in the archive, the recording of this. What I really want to emphasize is you want to gear down, not gear up before you go to bed. And watching the news, for example, is probably going to gear you up and wind you up before you go to bed. I would shut off all your devices, especially even with blue light coming from devices. When we have blue light coming into basically sensory sort of inputs here, the brain thinks, oh, it's daylight, let's stay awake. So especially given the news, you'd want to do things just to kind of wind down and gear down before you go to bed. Okay, so one thing, I think I mentioned this in the previous webinar, you know, kind of counting my blessings here, given this whole physical distancing thing here and people being not outside as much, I've been lucky. You know, I haven't had to wash my hair quite as often. And that saves me, I think I said it saves me about an hour every day. Well, I was exaggerating. Maybe that saves me about 30 minutes a day. So I know you probably can't tell, but there you go. I'm going to share with you an actual story of how important counting our blessings can be. And some years ago in my practice, I had a couple come to me, parents of a 14-year-old, and I said, well, how can I help you? And they said, well, it's our son, he's 14, and he's got low mood, we think he's depressed, it's hard for him to get out of bed, it's hard for him to even go to school. How long has this been going on? I asked, it's been going on for years. I go, oh, okay, well, let me meet with him, I'll see what I can do. So meet with him the next day, we'll call him Stu. And I met Stu and I had him fill out a sort of a depression screening to see how depressed he was. It was showing as severe. And he had kind of a low speech, he was kind of slumped over, low mood, low energy. I said, how long have you been experiencing this level of this mood, Stu? He said, it's been years. So just did this kind of assessment with him, just seeing what's been kind of working in his life, where some of the challenges are. The hour's coming to a close, and I said, Steve, you know, Stu, Steve, whatever, we do need to wind down now, and, you know, do you mind if I provide you with a bit of a suggestion? And how are we going with Stuart, Steve, Stu, one of those. And he says, sure, yeah, I'm open to a suggestion, but just keep it small. I said, okay, I will. I said, I'm just going to invite you just to maybe sometime during the day, maybe the end of the day, just write out one thing that went well for you that day. And one thing you're looking forward to the next day. It's one thing that went well for you in your day, one thing you're looking forward to the next day. I said, would you be willing to give it a try? He said, sure. Fast forward, he comes back 2 weeks later, and he's upright, his rate of speech is faster, he just seems more settled in his own skin, if you will. Do his depression screening inventory, he's showing his no depression. I said, how did you do that? He said, I did what you said. You know, I just recorded what I was most grateful for that day, what went well for me, one thing I'm looking forward to the next day. And guess what that helped this young man to do? It's kind of focused in a very kind of dark, sort of negative, limited sort of view of himself, his life in the world. This just kind of got him to open and broaden his view and see some of the positive things that were always there for him. Now, not always is a transformation this profound, but boy, I still get kind of shivers when I recall just his story and his outcome. Continue to physically distance, wash your hands, stay safe. You've heard this, of course. I prompt you, tell the ones close to you that you love them and you care for them. Smile and say hello to a stranger when you go out and get food. I've been noticing that a lot where I live. People, complete stranger on the other side of the street, hey, how are you? Take the time to reflect and count your blessings and appreciate what you have. What are you grateful for? Be able to write some things down that could really help with your sense of well-being and resilience. What a luxury it is to be quarantined and sheltered in place versus without a shelter. I would actually encourage that you make gratitude a part of your team check-in. I'm going to just invite you right now, maybe just to identify, we kind of did this exercise in the previous presentation. I'm going to high level it here because I think this is also quite important. I'm going to invite you just to identify 2 or 3 of your current stressors, 2 or 3 stressors going on for you. Okay. Now, I know it might be more than 2 or 3, but maybe just the top 2 or 3 for right now. So do you have some in mind there? Okay. If you notice these circles, starting from tight, sort of small circle of control, some control, little control or influence. Those 2 or 3 stressors you just recorded, just take a moment. Where would they fit within these circles? Is it something you clearly have control over, clearly don't have control over, or maybe it fits somewhere in the middle? It's going to take you, just take a moment just to do that. Where do your stressors fit within these circles? Okay, hopefully you have some idea and able to sort of kind of figure out where it sort of fits. For some of you may go, I don't know, it just seems all out of control, it seems all overwhelming. If that's the case, it sounds like maybe you're feeling pretty overwhelmed. And when we're in the fog, it's foggy. So just be gentle with that. And maybe you can come back to this exercise. Notice the size of these circles in relation to one another. What's the biggest one? What's the smallest one? Now, this is the reality. Whether you worry, panic about it or not, but what's on the outside of the circle, whether you worry or panic about it or not, and you clearly don't have control over it, it's not going to change anything. Whether you worry about it or not, if it's on that outer circle, all that worry and all that energy, it's not going to change a thing. And if you're clearly spending a lot of energy where clearly you don't have control over, things you don't have control over, that's called learned helplessness. And that's a hugely diminishing return. When you're trying to control things, you can't. And so this is the Serenity Prayer at work. Lord, grant me the, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And hopefully this provides you with the wisdom, a better understanding of what you have control over. I'll be honest, now that I'm 0 years old, that's right, now that I'm 0 years old, give or take a year or two, I remind myself of how much control I have over it. Or perhaps better stated, I remind myself of how little I have control over many things, as opposed to raging and struggling against it, learning to find peace with that. We're wrapping up now. Self-care is no longer a luxury, but a necessity. If you don't take a break, you're going to break. And maybe you're not taking a break from your business or venture, but maybe you're taking a break for it. So you can conserve your energy and ride out the storm and do what you need to do more effectively when you are re-engaging. I had a client come to me not too long ago, and I'm doing again the assessment, and I said, what are some things that you do to kind of help you through some of your challenges? What kind of sleep do you get? I don't have time to sleep. Okay, well, what kind of physical activity do you do? Who's got time to do exercise? Well, what's your eating like? Well, I grab what I can. Who's got time to eat? And I says, okay, it sounds like you don't have time to sleep, eat, or exercise. I said, do you have time to breathe? And he kind of looked at me, like I just kind of got his number, and it's like, yeah, okay, I guess, maybe it's time I started doing some self-care things. I think for sake of time, I'll just do this quicker breathing exercise. I'm just going to invite you I'm just going to share high level what we're going to do here. I'm going to invite you just breathing through your nose. We're going to pause our breath as we inhale, exhaling through the mouth. I'm going to invite you to pause, hold your breath a couple times as we exhale as well. Okay, so ready? Inhale, hold, a little more, hold, top it up, hold, out through the mouth, hold, a little more, hold, let it all out. Same thing. Inhale, hold, a little more, hold, top it up, hold, exhale through the mouth, hold, a little more, hold, let it all out. Same thing, one more time. Inhale, hold, a little more, hold, top it up, hold, exhale through the mouth, hold, a little more, hold, let it all out. And just breathe normally. And just notice what's going on for you right now. Wouldn't be surprised to be breathing more deeply, perhaps with your eyes lowered or closed even. How long did it take to do that? Less than a minute. Maybe it takes us from 5th gear to 4th gear. Maybe we did it a couple more times. Maybe it brings us kind of more to first or second gear and being better able to deal with our stressors. So the science is very clear. Have a healthy, happy, life. Move your body, get some exercise, quiet your mind. Hopefully, we just helped do that just now. Connect with others as much as you can. Live your purpose as much as you can. How can you practice or have some sense of a balance of these on a maybe not daily basis, but hopefully on a consistent enough basis? These are indeed challenging times, and perhaps a challenge for us and an opportunity to set more positive habits that stay with us for the rest of our lives. That being said, how can you model these to your team? Now, hopefully you got some valuable information from this presentation. I know we're going fairly quickly here, and there's certainly plenty of tools and information with our self-directed online Inward Strong program, which very happy for the support from Cisco, Women of Influence in BDC, and this is something that's made available free right now for the next few months for you, your home family, and your work family. And basically, the idea behind it is, if you couldn't bring, these are 24/7 issues, we better darn well have 24/7 supports. If you couldn't bring, someone to the resource, let's bring the resource to the person. So basically, it's a series of video modules. This is a self-directed program, and these video modules, kind of on-demand video coaching, provides you with information as well as encouragement, tools, and so on. All these are battle tested. We took what worked frontline and put it online. Everything's evidence-based and works well for many situations. As you can imagine, these issues are fueled by isolation and loneliness. So there's ways to connect with a community. If you so choose, of course, it would be anonymous in our peer support forum. And those are the touch points, again, providing not just information, but encouragement through weekly emails. And these issues are not just affecting us as individuals, but of course, this kind of a spillover effect, if you will. These issues impact everyone we're close to, family, partners, and what have you. So there's a program there for them as well. And really, what this is about is hope. Having a sense of connection, having a sense of hope, a sense of encouragement, is what the program provides. And these are the issues that we address. This is why we've been awarded, given how comprehensive we are and just the social impact, the results we tend to get with folks, and dealing with self-esteem, relationships, boundaries, some of the common causes we talked about, anxiety and depression. We're talking about trauma. So it does talk about that and help normalize that, and some things to help overcome some of that. And there's tools even for emotional intelligence, especially for business leaders. Emotional intelligence, recognizing and responding to one another's emotions can be a valuable thing. There's a tool called the T-File that helps do that as well. And we've had countless folks from all walks of life just benefiting from the program. In fact, folks that have been in the program years ago are coming back now that COVID has been a concern to them and overwhelming them. They just see this program as a place to just get connected and resourced again. Again, it's tipping the scale in their favor. Just briefly, some of our success. CAMH actually included us in the textbook as the example of an effective self-directed program. For those who have an employee assistance provider, we mentioned that there's often maybe a 5% uptake, just a handful of a percentage of folks who access their EAP. Usually when we launch with organizations, we get closer to 25, 30%, just reducing the barriers for folks. Again, we're very excited to partner with some of the folks that brought about this webinar. And yeah, we just want to make this resource available to you and those you care about. Earlier in this presentation, I had you do a simulation, and I had you imagine the worst time of your life. And often, for a lot of us, that worst time of our lives is happening right now. What if there was a resource that was an immediate, ongoing resource that was personal, portable, and powerful, provided you with valuable information and encouragement, and helped you live your best life? That resource is available for you. And you can go to this link, inwardstrong.site/Cisco, and for you, your home family, your work family, it's available for you. I mentioned next steps. You might want to normalize stressors going on for your team, check in with them. You might need to redefine what success looks like you might want to share this webinar or the previous one just to help normalize with that, some of the stressors. So as we're wrapping up here, thank you for just your time. I'm going to just put out this reflective question for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your current self-care or coping score? 1, not doing well at all. 10, fabulous. What is your current self-care score? 10 being the best. Okay, you have a number in mind? What makes it that score versus a lower number? What is it you're currently doing that's working? And at least keeping it at that score and maintaining a sense of self-care for you. It might just be about highlighting some of the resources you're currently using, things you're doing to make it that score. That being said, what can you do to raise your score a point or even half a point higher? What can you do to raise it even a little bit? Perhaps maybe a suggestion from this webinar. I love this saying, being listened to so close to being loved, most people can't tell the difference. Being listened to so close to being loved, acknowledged, validated. Can you imagine what this world would be like if we just paid, heed to these words? So this is a summary of some of the tools we talked about in terms of just normalizing some of the stresses going on, the grief response, or mental bandwidth, knowing what your peak times are, knowing what your life accounts are about and how you might be able to keep them balanced, some sleep tips, taking a breath, mini breaks, gratitude, etc. So as we're wrapping up here, this is what the objectives were. And really my mission today was to, there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding regarding just mental health and what's going on in terms of stressors and anxiety for folks. And what I really wanted to do was just help provide more context, understanding, and hopefully less fear, and normalizing what's going on for you and the ones you care about. I'd just like to share this. Our next presentation is happening in just a couple weeks, and here's a sneak peek of how to be more productive and resilient in terms of getting better, able to prioritize, recognizing maybe if you're trying to be encouraging, there's a diminishing return, and that might be going in the opposite direction, and some evidence-based practices in terms of managing your team. And again, here's the resource available to you, something that could provide some hope for you. And let's just go with some QA here. I think we have a little bit of time still. I know we're wrapping up. Okay, oh gosh, it's so hard to read this. All right, it's just this small little thing, talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Thank you. It sounds like some folks have found it to be an interesting presentation. Maybe we have time for one question. I want to honor your time. So how do I know if this is a kind of a common cold, mental health issue or stress issue? That's a very good question. And I'd have to say at this point, it's kind of hard to tell, I would say. If you've had a pre-existing condition, the whole COVID thing and stressors might have just kind of ramped that up. I would just think that a lot of us are having kind of an adjustment issue right now, adjustment stress. A lot of us will be experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. And my guess is, I'm not sure if it would be kind of a clinical diagnosable sort of realm or more just given all the stress that's going on, it's an adjustment thing. I'd like to think, and I would imagine post-COVID, a lot of those symptoms will subside. However, it might be good to sort of check in with yourself, or if it's really concerned with a healthcare provider, maybe every few months or so would be maybe my best response to that. Okay, gosh, I just realized I think we're just running in terms of our time here. I want to thank you for your time. Stay well and be gentle. And I'm just going to turn it over to you, Omar. Thank you.
It's actually me.
Oh, so sorry.
It's quite all right. I want to let everyone know that I did post some resources into the chat, so please take a look at that. And thank you for attending. As a reminder, a survey is when you close your browser, you're going to be taken to a survey. Please take a moment and provide us with your feedback. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day.